Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel and thank you for joining me for another True Crime Mystery Monday. Today we're talking about a young woman who disappeared off of a cruise ship. But before we get started, there's no sponsor. Don't worry, there's no sponsor. But what I do have for you is a request to make sure that if you've already subscribed to this channel that you are still subscribed. Mysteriously, people are being unsubscribed from my channel and they're also now being allowed to turn notifications on to be notified when I post a video. So that's definitely strange, but just make sure that you are still subscribed and make sure you have your notifications turned on. Also follow me on Instagram and Twitter. The links are in the description box. I'm a lot more vocal on there daily about, different crimes that are happening. It's a way for you to keep up with what I'm looking into and what I'm interested in when I'm not sitting here and recording a video for you guys. Okay, let's get started. So cruise ships have always seemed kind of ominous to me. I don't know why. Everyone always says how fun they are and how I should definitely go on one, but I don't know. There's something that just holds me back. It's the same feeling I get right before I board a plane, which I'm pretty scared of flying as well. It's just this heavy, anxious feeling. I guess it's because the ocean in general has always fascinated me, but also terrified me at the same time. It's this big, beautiful, kind of mysterious place. I love going whale watching. I love to see the whales and the dolphins, but I'm also completely terrified of the ocean because, there's things in there that we haven't even discovered yet. And we talk a lot about this in the video I did on MH370, the ship that just kind of disappeared into thin air, and I'll link that in the description box if you guys haven't seen it and you're interested in checking it out. So I'm not even sure I would actually let myself enjoy a cruise, and after doing some research for this case, I realized that my feelings were not completely paranoid and they weren't completely unfounded. People go missing on cruise ships all the time. It's a lot more common than you think, a lot more common than you would like to think. Since the year 2000, there have been 313 documented cases of people going missing from cruise vessels, and only about 10% of these have ever been resolved. Additionally, cruise lines are not legally required to make public every case of a person who has gone missing or fallen overboard while on their ships. It's estimated that only about 10 to 15% of the actual cases are ever documented, which makes that number of 313 much larger in reality. So 313 documented cases, only 10% of which are resolved. But then you have the fact that only 10 to 15% of the actual cases are ever reported. So that 313 most likely is only 10 to 15% of the real number. Amy Lynn Bradley is probably the most well-known person to have vanished from a cruise ship, and I do want to one day make a video on her case because it's always fascinated and frustrated me. But today we're talking about another young woman, Rebecca Coriam, who mysteriously went missing from the Disney Wonder, a cruise ship operated by Disney Cruise Lines. The Wonder was the second ship to join the Disney fleet in 1999, and it's decorated in the Art Nouveau style, so there's a lot of stylized floral patterns, exotic materials, decorations, geometric lines, etc. The Wonder has 11 public decks and can accommodate 2,400 passengers in 875 staterooms. It can also carry a crew of approximately 950. Originally, the ship only sailed 3 or 4 night cruises to the Bahamas, but in 2011, it began to sail different routes, adding stops in Alaska, the Mexican Riviera, Hawaii, and the Caribbean to its itinerary. In 2011, when Rebecca Coriam vanished, the Wonder called the city of Los Angeles its home. 24-year-old Rebecca, or Bex as she liked to be called, was originally from Chester, England, where she lived with her parents, her sister, and her 2 foster brothers. She attended a Catholic high school where she joined the British Army Cadets, which is a youth organization sponsored by the UK's Ministry of Defence and the British Army. On its website, the cadets tell aspiring youths that if they want to aim higher, feel more confident, and get a head start on their future, they should join the Army Cadets to take part in fun, friendship, action, and adventure. After high school, Rebecca attended Plymouth University at Exeter, where she majored in sports science, and Liverpool Hope University, where she focused on youth studies, philosophy, and psychology. For a while, she also worked at the Chester Zoo, following in the footsteps of her grandparents, Kevin and Dolores Coriam, who have a memorial bench located on the zoo grounds that Rebecca would often go to and sit at to have her lunch while she was working at the zoo. Rebecca also worked at the Doubletree by Hilton along with her sister Rachel, and they seemed to really enjoy it there, and they had a very close group of friends from there. After college, Rebecca worked at Camp America, which is an exchange student program of sorts. They bring in counselors from different countries to help out with the kids at summer camps. She did this for 4 months in New York and Maine, and she phoned her parents back home often to tell them about all the interesting things that she was doing, living out in the wild. She talked about how she saw bears, but she wasn't afraid of them because all you had to do was clap loudly and it would scare them away. I would never clap loudly at a bear. I'd never heard about clapping loudly. As far as I knew, when you see a bear, you play dead. Not clap in their faces, but as a non-wilderness sort of girl, I probably don't know as well as Rebecca Coriam did. Rebecca was a friendly young woman, outgoing and bubbly with a love of the outdoors. She was athletic, participating in activities such as running, cycling, swimming, horse riding, and basketball. Rebecca was smart and an avid reader, and she enjoyed working with children, which is why she decided to go to London in June of 2010 to interview with Disney to be a youth counselor on one of their cruise ships. It was a very competitive job that she was aiming to be chosen for, one which thousands of applicants apply to every year from all over the world. However, Rebecca had the resume and the experience to grab a position on the Wonder and was given a 4-month contract. The majority of crew members are given similar 4 or 5-month contracts, and they are required to take a mandatory 8-week vacation after they complete their contract and before they start their next one. Crew members work on the ship 6 days a week, so it's necessary to recharge your batteries, put your feet on dry land, and go home to see your friends and family. Before Rebecca set sail, she was sent to Disney World in Florida for 4 days for training. She was excited about getting on the ship and starting this first step to what she believed would be a promising and bright future. She had no idea that while working on the cruise ship, she would also meet someone who would become very important to her when she boarded the ship in June of 2010. 29-year-old Tracy Medley was a self-proclaimed wild party girl who was unsure of her own sexuality when she met Rebecca on the Wonder during a crew party. Tracy said the connection was immediate and they flirted all night. From that moment on, the two of them were inseparable, and Tracy claimed they took things to the next level and that it just felt right. They were madly in love, Tracy says. There was only one problem, however. Tracy wasn't really available. Her boyfriend, Devin Hyde, who also worked on the cruise ship as a bartender, was on shore leave when Rebecca joined the ship's crew. And shore leave is a period of time that crew members are required to leave the ship, as we talked about previously, to see family, to recharge their batteries before heading back out to sea for many months. After 2 weeks of reuniting, spending time with family, seeing friends, Rebecca returned to the Disney Wonder. And this 2-week period would be the last time her family would ever see her. For almost 2 months on the Disney Wonder, it was just Rebecca and Tracy, but then Rebecca had to return unexpectedly to the UK to attend the funeral of her grandfather. She was home for 2 weeks, a sad but welcome homecoming for her family who hadn't seen her in a long time. When Rebecca got back to the ship after her short visit home, Devin had returned, and he and Tracy had pretty much picked up right where they'd left off. Suddenly, Rebecca realized that she was a third wheel of sorts, and when she saw Tracy and Devin heading off to his cabin together on the evening of March 17th, 2011, she was upset. Well, according to Tracy, she was upset. And she told Tracy that she was in love with her, but she felt that Tracy was just messing around and using her to experiment. Tracy also said that at this point, Rebecca expressed a desire to leave the ship. The night before she went missing, Rebecca became extremely emotional and upset, and she woke Tracy up in the middle of the night crying, saying that she was angry with herself because she tried to jump off the ship but she was too weak to follow through. Tracy said, quote, "I was so scared. I told her she was crazy. It was too much." Rebecca finally allowed herself to be calmed by Tracy and 3 other crew members. The next morning, March 21st, the Disney Wonder left Los Angeles and headed for Puerto Vallarta, Mexico. Rebecca messaged her parents on Facebook. That's how she would contact them when she was on the ship. And she let them know that the ship was leaving and she'd call them the next day. Rebecca's parents, Mike and Ann Coriam, they did get a call 12 hours later, but it wasn't from their daughter. It was Disney on the phone, informing them that Rebecca was missing.
And the thought of not seeing her again, I don't know. It's frightening to think about it, really.
We just don't know what happened to her, do we? That's the worst.
The last time that Rebecca was ever seen, it was 5:45 a.m. on the morning of March 22nd, 2011. She was captured on the ship's CCTV in the crew lounge, talking on the internal telephone line, which means you can only call people that are on that ship. In the video, she's clearly and visibly distressed. She also appears to be wearing men's clothing, which are several sizes too large for her. And when another crew member approaches her and asks if she's okay, she nods, hangs up the phone. She appears to say, "Yeah, I'm fine," and then she walks away. And she was never seen again. When she didn't show up for her 9 a.m. shift, the staff was alerted and the search began, but they didn't find her. They paged her over the intercom, they checked her cabin, they scoured the ship, but there was no sign of Rebecca Coriam. All they found was a sandal that they believed to be hers, which Disney had allegedly discovered on Deck 5, which is the crew pool area. Now let's talk about the hours leading up to the last time that Rebecca was seen on the ship's CCTV. Eyewitnesses put Rebecca at the ship's bar having drinks with Tracy and Devin. They described Rebecca as acting normally, and they said that she seemed very cheerful and normal. Afterwards, they all went back to Devin's cabin where Tracy alleges Rebecca initiated a threesome. Tracy said, quote, "She just went up to him and started kissing him. We all basically had sex with each other. At one point, they went into the bathroom. To me, it was the best case scenario. Then he came out and came over to me, and we started fooling around." End quote. It was then that Rebecca came out of the bathroom and the realization hit her. She saw Tracy and Devin together, and she made the connection that it was never going to be just her and Tracy again. Tracy said, quote, "The way she looked at us, it was like it was fun when it was her and him and me and her, but for her to see him and me together, I think she was like, what am I doing here?" According to Tracy, Rebecca took a shower and then said she wanted to go for a walk. Tracy told her it was late and she wasn't going to go out and take a walk. And Rebecca responded, "That's fine, but I'm still going to go and take a walk." The last words that Tracy said to Rebecca, according to her, were, "You're coming back, right?" She claims that Rebecca responded affirmatively, and then Tracy, who was exhausted, told Rebecca to bolt the door so that she wouldn't get locked out because Tracy was going to go to sleep. So it's pretty much the same thing that you would do in like a college dorm. You just take the bolt out of the door so it's sticking out when the door is open, and then when you close the door, it appears to be closed, but that bolt is still holding it open so that people can go in and out easily and they don't have to knock and wake you up or have a key. Tracy claims that she woke up the next morning to find that Rebecca had not returned and the bolt of that door was still protruding, keeping the door ajar. Okay, so Rebecca is gone, right? Vanished. They search all over the ship for her and they find no sign of her. So obviously there's going to be an investigation, if you want to call it that. The U.S. Coast Guard and the Mexican Navy were notified and they performed a search of the surrounding waters.
The following day, the vessel docked in Puerto Vallarta and the Mexican Navy and U.S. Coast Guard were deployed to search the seas. Despite onboard inspections and alerts to the 3,000 passengers, the ship returned to LA yesterday without Rebecca. Her parents and cousin were there.
Neither of these law enforcement agencies actually conducted an investigation, however, due to the flags of convenience system. The jurisdiction of the investigation falls to the country that the ship is registered in. And in this case, the Disney Wonder was registered in the Bahamas. Now, the reason most cruise ships are registered in different countries is because they use these countries as tax havens. A tax haven is generally an offshore country that offers foreign individuals and businesses little or no tax liability in a politically and economically static environment. So pretty much they don't have to pay US taxes even if they run the majority of their business dealings out of the United States, even if they still utilize the Coast Guard for help on the high seas, which is paid for by US tax dollars. It's kind of dirty, actually. These individuals and these companies also share very little or no financial information with US tax authorities. In March of 2020, NBC News reported that the 3 biggest cruise lines were incorporated in equivalent exemption countries where they are not required to pay the 21% corporate income tax that US companies are required to pay. These companies take advantage of an obscure provision in the United States tax code which allows shipping companies to evade taxes by incorporating overseas and flying foreign flags. Take Carnival Cruise Lines, for instance. Over the past 5 years, they have paid total taxes equivalent to only 1.1% of their cumulative $11.3 billion in profit. It's kind of ridiculous, honestly, and don't even get me started on the effect of these cruise ships on the environment. A medium-sized passenger ship pumps 21,000 gallons of raw sewage directly into the sea every day, and noise from the ships is a big threat to orcas who are endangered because they drown out the calls of whales trying to communicate with each other when they're in danger. The whales can't hear their whale brothers and sisters calling for them, so they don't go to find them, save them, and help them. But that's just my little spiel on the evils of these corporations that abuse the tax system and take Americans' money, but then they don't want to pay taxes into the country that pretty much allows them to stay in business. And then as they pocket these billions and billions of dollars, they go on to pollute our oceans and kill our endangered species. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. So the investigation into the Rebecca Coriam disappearance fell to the Royal Bahamian Police Force, and Disney contacted them 3 days after they disappeared. They assigned 1 detective to this case. 1 detective. Disney flew him out on a private jet to LA once the ship had returned to port, and this detective, a man named Paul Rolls, spent a total of 1 day aboard the Disney Wonder. He interviewed only 6 employees out of 950 and talked to 0 passengers out of 2,000. So a real thorough job was done, evidently. Rebecca's parents, Mike and Ann Coriam, were also flown to LA to meet with the ship's captain and Detective Roll and to ask questions on the progress of the investigation into their missing daughter. Apparently, they were given what the Coriams called the full Disney treatment. Ann Coriam said, quote, "Everything was staged by Disney. We were taken in a car with blacked out windows to the boat's back entrance as passengers disembarked at the front. They took us to a room where they played CCTV footage of Rebecca where she largely appeared to be fine," end quote. After this really thorough investigation, the captain of the Disney Wonder and the Royal Bahamian Investigator told Rebecca's parents that they believed, sadly, she had been swept overboard by a rogue wave while on Deck 5, sometime between 6 a.m. and 9 a.m. Now, Deck 5 is where the crew swimming pool and lounge area is located, and it's right on the bow of the ship. On cruise ships, they like to keep the employees and the guests very separate, so the crew will have their own designated areas for everything, so they aren't mixing with the passengers. They have their own pool area, their own bar, their own fitness area, and dining hall. There's even separate corridors that crew can use to get around the boat that are kind of running parallel to the passenger corridors, but they remain unseen. They're like on the other side of the wall. It's very similar to the way that Disney theme parks have an underground city that allow the employees and the characters to kind of leave one area, go underground, and then pop up across the park in a different area without just walking through the park. The investigator left the ship the same day that he got on it, and Rebecca's family never received a conclusion to what happened to their daughter. They never received a completed report. They never received any more of an answer than it was a rogue wave. What we need to do now is dig a little deeper, look at the theories, and examine which of them are the most probable. Now, the rogue wave theory is Disney's official explanation. It was their official explanation in 2011, and it remains their official explanation today. They theorized that she was on the phone at 5:45 in the morning, quite upset, and then she went to deck 5 to clear her head, and then she was just swept away or knocked into the water by this giant wave that hit the ship, but no one else seemed to notice. Now, the bow of the ship is the most dangerous place to be, one of the most dangerous places to be on a ship, especially if a rogue wave hits. And I'm not trying to sound like a rogue wave denier or like a flat earther or something. I'm not trying to say that rogue waves don't exist. They do. They're terrifying. But that's the point. They do exist, and they are terrifying, and they leave their mark behind on whatever ship that they encounter. A rogue wave is defined by that wave being 2 times bigger than the average height of waves in that area. And like I said, these things are massive and terrifying. A rogue wave can disable and sink even the largest ships and oil rigs, and something can take place called bow slamming. When a ship encounters high waves, it produces an effect that sends the bow of the ship out of the water, and as the wave passes, the bow falls or slams back onto the surface at a high acceleration. So if Rebecca was hanging out on deck 5 and the Disney Wonder encountered one of these waves, it is likely that the force of the bow slamming back into the water could have caused her to fall into the ocean, and from that height, the water would have felt like hitting pavement. She would have been knocked unconscious immediately, most likely, and then drowned. Now, the reason Disney believed that she was on deck 5 that morning was because they found a sandal that they told her parents had belonged to Rebecca. Just one lone sandal on deck 5. A very spooky, ominous sign, of course, if it was Rebecca's sandal. However, not only did her friends and family notice that the sandal wasn't Rebecca's size or style, there was actually another crew member's name and cabin number written on the side of it, which apparently the investigator missed while he was doing all of his amazing and thorough detective work. 9 months after Rebecca disappeared, and her parents had gotten very few answers, Guardian reporter John Ronson booked himself a cabin on the Disney Wonder during a trip that would follow the same route Rebecca had traveled from LA to Puerto Vallarta. I'm going to be referring to his investigation and his article several times as we talk about the theories. John talked to a friend of Rebecca's on board, a girl he called Melissa. I'm not sure if that's her real name, but that is what he called her. And Melissa told John that Rebecca was the most amazing little burst of energy, that people were completely drawn to her. She loved life, she was always bouncing around everywhere, and they were very close friends, but sometimes Rebecca's energy could become a bit too much, especially after a long day when you would just want to relax, and Rebecca would be zipping around everywhere, playing pranks on people, and pretty much just being mischievous. Now, about the flip-flops, the sandal that Disney found on deck 5 and told Anne and Mike Coriam that they were Rebecca's, Melissa had this to say, quote, "They weren't her flip-flops. Mike and Anne showed them to me. They were too big. They weren't her style. They were pink and flowery and Hawaiian. I'd never seen her wear them. Why didn't Disney come to me or her girlfriend and say, 'Can you identify these as Bex's?' Instead, they put them in her room for when her parents got on board. Who does that? Disney swears they've told us everything they know, which is that they don't know anything. But most of us think bullshit. Someone must know something. Someone's covering something up." End quote. The official report that was released from that detective role from the Bahamas and from Disney claimed that Rebecca was on the phone in the 5th floor crew lounge. Like I said, she can be seen wearing oversized men's clothing, looking very upset. Someone asks her, is she okay? She responds, "I'm fine," before hanging up the phone and pushing her hair back with both hands, putting her hands in her pockets, and then walking away. The report states that she then walked to the 5th floor, to the pool deck, where she was swept away by this rogue wave. The crew of the Disney Wonder even had a memorial service for her at this spot where the sandals that weren't even hers were found. Well, come to find out, that CCTV footage that showed Rebecca caught on camera for the very last time, allegedly, despite there being several security cameras all over the boat that did not capture her at any time after that. Well, it turns out that that footage was not taken on the 5th floor. It was taken on the 1st floor, and when Disney made the video viewable to Rebecca's parents, they intentionally cropped out the location stamp. This is important not only because the official report doesn't actually reflect the truth, but because when Rebecca walked away, she was heading in the direction of the boat's health center. And there's no possible way she could have fallen off the boat from the 1st floor deck because there's no outside access. It's all enclosed. If what Disney said is true and she headed for the 5th floor crew pool after hanging up the phone, she would have had to have gone in the other direction, which would have been towards the stairs or the elevator, which would bring her up to the 5th floor. And if she went towards the direction of the health center, which she did, we can see on the video that she went in the direction of the health center and then changed her mind and decided to head back to the 5th floor pool, she would have had to have turned around, walked back the way she came, since the stairs and the elevators were at the other end, and the CCTV camera that had recorded her talking on the phone would have again captured her walking by, but it didn't. There was also an eyewitness who had come forward in the days after Rebecca's disappearance, another crew member who wanted to remain anonymous, and he claimed that he saw with his own eyes Rebecca Coriam jump off the Disney Wonder of her own accord at 3:30 in the morning. Now, this obviously contradicts with the CCTV footage, which clearly puts her on the boat still at 5:30 and 5:45 a.m., and to explain this inconsistency, we have a few possible options. Either this anonymous man, this anonymous crew member, saw what he thought was a woman jumping off the ship, which I feel like it's kind of hard to mistake something else for someone jumping off the ship. I think you'd remember pretty clearly if you saw somebody just jump off of a cruise ship into the water. So that's the first option, that he just mistook what he saw. And the second option is that he's lying. Why would this person who wanted to remain unnamed lie? For attention? Because his employer, Disney, had asked him to? Did this person even exist, or was it just a fake person or a fake eyewitness account created by a company who wanted to emerge from this crisis untouched? And let's say that Rebecca did somehow manage to make it to the 5th floor without being seen by any of the ship's CCTV cameras. Which could be possible since, like I said, there's many crew corridors and not all of them are going to be under as much surveillance, as Disney's going to put more emphasis on the boat's public areas being under watch. Once she made it up onto that 5th floor pool deck, the employee pool, she would be surrounded on both sides by 6 feet high barriers, placed there specifically so people won't fall off. And if she had been on the deck and this rogue wave happened along and took her out, this wave would have had to have been over 100 feet high, which once again is possible. They do get that high. It's terrifying. But what really doesn't make sense is that no one else would have seen this massive wave. No one even felt it hit the boat. There was no damage to the boat, which a wave that big most certainly would have left something behind to show it had been there. No one saw it. No one felt it. It's as if that wave just kind of like popped out of the water for a moment, like picked her up and then vanished without touching anything but Rebecca. Kind of like in Moana, when the sea's always picking Moana up and putting her back on the boat and taking her and putting her somewhere else. The sea never touches anything else. It has a very accurate aim for just Moana. And that's how I envision it when I'm thinking about the scenario, because to me that's the only way a rogue wave could be responsible for Rebecca Coriam's disappearance, without anybody else seeing it, without anybody else feeling it, without anybody else noticing it, without any damage happening to the boat. And as we know, Moana, although an excellent Disney movie, is a cartoon. And it's fake, it's not real. That doesn't actually happen. So no, I don't really believe the rogue wave theory, and I'm surprised that Disney used it as their official answer to the question of where Rebecca went. And it does suggest that they might have had something to hide as shown by their need to crop the video and withhold the actual last known location that Rebecca was at. So we have to ask ourselves, did Disney have something to hide? Did they have something that they didn't want anybody else to know? The fact that they tried to pass off these random sandals as Rebecca's, the fact that they purposely cropped that CCTV footage so the actual last known location of Rebecca wouldn't be revealed. It certainly is very suspicious and thought-provoking. However, it is possible that Rebecca just accidentally fell off the boat. Her friend Melissa had seen Rebecca earlier that night at 11 p.m. when they'd both finished up with work. She said that they met in what Melissa called a secret corridor, which just means a crew corridor that isn't under surveillance. They were sitting there together. Rebecca had her head on Melissa's knee, and they were laughing. Rebecca was trying to pull off Melissa's fake eyelashes, and then Rebecca asked Melissa if she was going to the bar later, and Melissa said that she was, but she ended up not going. But as we know, Rebecca did go to the crew bar that evening, and she had some drinks with Tracy Medley and Tracy's boyfriend Devin before going back to Devin's cabin with them. It turned out that the person Rebecca was on the phone with early that morning, right before she went missing, it was another crew member, a mutual friend of both Rebecca and Tracy, who had played peacemaker before with the couple. Rebecca had called this unnamed person, I'm not sure what her name is, I can't find it, and told her what happened with Tracy and Devin in Devin's cabin. And she told her friend that she was upset. And this friend promised Rebecca that the next day she would talk to Tracy and try to figure it all out. But she basically told Rebecca, don't worry about it, don't dwell on it, just get some sleep and we'll deal with it in the morning. Melissa thinks after this call, Rebecca may have gone to the crew deck to be alone and to clear her head, knowing at that early hour she'd probably be the only person there. Melissa said that Rebecca was a bit spontaneous and she could be kind of a risk taker. She thinks it might be possible that Rebecca could have climbed up on the 6-foot wall to sit on the ledge, just to feel for a moment that she was off the ship, not really considering that it could be dangerous for her. If Rebecca had been up on those 6-foot high walls and even a slightly choppy wave hit the boat, she could have lost her balance and fallen off, completely accidentally. But here's the thing, if that's the case, Disney would most certainly know that since, like I said, there's CCTVs everywhere. Now, when asked about the possibility of this additional footage, Disney refused to reveal how many cameras they had on board or where those cameras were located, citing security reasons. So logically, if that is what happened to Rebecca, Disney would know and they would have footage of it. And Melissa thinks that they do. She said, quote, "Security on that ship is ultra tight. You can't get on or off without your ID card. Down by the crew pool, there's HR offices, the crew gym, the crew office that deals with passports, money, documentation, and they're saying that there's no CCTV cameras?" End quote. When John Ronson of The Guardian asked Melissa why she thought that Disney would be trying to suppress it, she responded, "To try to protect the brand. If it was 6 a.m. and they were doing their job and watching the front, someone must have seen her go over. Or if they didn't, they're covering up why they didn't see her go over." And I mean, obviously, there's other things that are hard to swallow about Disney's story. They lied about the sandals that apparently she was swept right out of by this rogue wave, even though the sandal managed to maintain its hold to the deck of the ship, but, an actual person was taken away by the rogue wave, but the sandal was like, I'm not leaving the ship. There was no displacement of water in the crew pool, which would happen if a wave hit deck 5. There would be more water from the ocean in the pool. Those sandals were clearly marked and belonged to somebody else, but Disney and their investigator decided to just overlook that, like it wasn't important, and then they snuck into her cabin and planted the sandals there, so her parents might be more willing to accept the rogue wave theory, because see, if they had a sandal that belonged to Rebecca that they could place on deck 5, then they could prove she'd been on deck 5. Disney lied about where she was when she made that phone call. They were incredibly uncooperative when it came to providing additional CCTV footage, although it's very likely they have on camera the last moments of Rebecca's life. Would they do all this to protect the brand? Short answer, yes, I think so, but we'll talk about that more in depth in a little bit. So we've pretty much established that Disney's official explanation of what happened is very unlikely to be what actually happened. But what are the other theories? Whenever someone goes missing in a different country or on a cruise ship, one theory always pops up without fail, and that's human trafficking. And I mean, there's a reason that theory is always popping up, because it's a very plausible theory. Human trafficking happens every day, all over the world. It's not a myth, it's not a conspiracy, it actually happens. In considering how much crime does take place on cruise ships, which are pretty much just lawless, independent cities floating in the water, usually with unlimited alcohol and no actual police force. If someone was in the industry of human trafficking, cruise ships might be a perfect hunting ground. This man, Jeff Furlong, worked as security on cruise ships for 6 years, serving on 5 ships for 2 major cruise lines.
Security was way down the league. You have to remember that it's a floating hotel, so entertainment and dining and drinking and gambling are the principal aims of the ship.
Furlong claims that many crimes were reported, but few were actually investigated, with numerous serious incidents being brushed under the carpet. He also claims that roughly 95% of these crimes are sexual assaults on women, with the assault rate being 50% higher than the average American city. 80% of these assaults on board are committed by a crew member, or they have a crew member involved. Cruise lines, who make their money by marketing a floating paradise, obviously have an interest in keeping these kinds of things a secret. And when an assault is reported, it isn't handled with an investigation, but with damage control and deal making, according to A&E, who produced a 2-part special called Cruise Ships: Nightmare Journeys. Jeff Furlong said victims would be offered free cruises, free holidays, and he even knows of one person who was offered 10 free cruises in exchange for their silence.
The captain or the hotel director, who would be in daily, minute-by-minute contact with headquarters, would do things like offer you free holidays just for you or your family, or I've even known one person was offered 10 cruises.
He said he would get a report of an assault and he would seal the cabin that it had happened in, and the next moment he'd go in and find that the bed linen and clothing had been removed. Additionally, cruise lines based out of the US are not required to do criminal background checks on their passengers, and they don't have a policy of preventing someone from sailing with them if they do have a criminal history, even if they are a registered sex offender. There are background checks performed on employees, but Jim Walker, who's a Miami maritime attorney, he's not sure how valid these background checks actually are. He said, quote, "You've got to understand, people are coming from all over the world," end quote. He wonders how effective these background checks would be coming from countries who might not have advanced computerized record-keeping systems. He's seen personally crew members lie on their applications and get the job anyways, and honestly, the environment of a cruise ship might attract the kind of person who's interested in using it as their hunting grounds. It's a non-stop party with so many people traveling freely around the boat, on the boat, off the boat. Many of them have had a few too many drinks, they aren't familiar with their surroundings, and no one's actually watching. Additionally, as we can see, due to questions of whose jurisdiction a crime might fall in while the ship is in international waters, an investigation is usually half-assed, which I think we can safely say was illustrated by one guy being sent to interview a ship with over 2,000 people on it for one day. And if an investigation does happen, it's mainly just to say that they did one, and it's not a thorough investigation. It's not an investigation that is actually being performed to get to the truth. It's an investigation being performed to find a fall guy or a story to explain what happened. Now, a person who knows this, who knows that these cruise ships are kind of like the Wild West, and this is a person who, has access to Google, so pretty much everybody in the world, they might take advantage of such disorganization and lack of law and order on a cruise ship and use these ships to carry out their crimes. In Rebecca's case, there were 3 events that led some to believe she may have somehow made it off that boat alive, but as a prisoner. 2 weeks after she disappeared, Rebecca's parents noticed activity on one of her credit cards, but it wasn't a card that was found with Rebecca's things in her cabin after she went missing, so it was theorized that she was either still alive and using it herself, or someone had stolen it from her and they were using it, or someone had taken her and the credit card and they were using the credit card while they were keeping her captive.
That new clue in the search for the young cruise worker turns out to be recent activity on her credit card. It's one of the few hopeful signs the family's received since she vanished in March.
Rebecca Coriam's mother received an email over the weekend from her daughter's bank reporting recent financial activity on her credit card.
It could be that, she's alive. Well, again, it could be somebody else trying to get in the account, or it could be someone trying to get in ours. I don't know. It's in the hands. It's being investigated at the moment. That's all I know. We know on that at the moment.
It hasn't been reported where that credit card was used, such as a specific country or a specific location. As far as I can tell, it seems like the credit card company won't reveal that to Rebecca's family because they aren't the card holder. But we do know it was used. Additionally, Rebecca's family had been dutifully checking her Facebook, which they had the password to, in order to see if someone was trying to communicate with Rebecca or if someone had been threatening her before she went missing. Rebecca often used Facebook to communicate with her family and friends back home in the UK while she was out at sea, so they thought that it was a good place to start. One day they tried to log in, only to find that the password on the Facebook account had been changed. A year after Rebecca disappeared, a woman emailed her family and claimed that she'd seen Rebecca in Venice, Italy, with a dark-haired man. This woman said she was 85% sure that the woman she saw was Rebecca. Now, Rebecca's passport and all her identification was still in her cabin, so if she did make it off that boat and ended up in Venice, Italy, it's more than likely she was brought there illegally. There's another connection that I found in the deep depths of the internet, and I'm not sure if it holds any water, but I do think it's interesting. This is John Ludwig, and John Ludwig had previously admitted to being involved with the Natalie Holloway case. This is a very well-known case. I would say top 5 of the well-known cases out there is Natalie Holloway. Now, John Ludwig claims that he helped her killer dispose of her body, but he was never charged with anything. In 2019, John Ludwig was stabbed by a woman that he was attempting to kidnap in Northport, Florida.
This is John Ludwig with Joran Vandersloot. He claims to have helped Joran dispose of Natalie Holloway's body. Now there's more twists in this case. This is the woman who stabbed Ludwig to death. Now more twists in this case decades later. Private investigator TJ Ward's worked the Holloway case for more than a decade. He thinks any secrets Ludwig had with Joran Vandersloot died with him.
Is Vandersloot going to roll over and talk about what he knows or what he shared with John? I doubt it.
Police say Ludwig was stabbed in the abdomen during the struggle for the knife. The only motive they've released is that Ludwig was stalking Emily in person and over social media.
So this is a guy who clearly has a problem with respecting women and their boundaries, and clearly doesn't have an issue getting his hands dirty and participating in illegal activity, and even admitting to that because he knows he's not going to be charged. But it seems like some observant web sleuths have made some more connections between Ludwig and a few other well-known missing persons cases, including Rebecca Coriam's. There's a video and there's like a blog post. It's in a different language, but you can translate it, so something does get lost in translation, but I thought it was pretty interesting. I'll link those in the description box. But Ludwig, John Ludwig, was well known to love sailing. His uncle was a nautical captain. It seems he had the ability and the connections to travel around to different countries without using a passport, because his passport puts him in Aruba for the very first time ever in his life in 2009, but he told people, and he's admitted, that he had traveled to Aruba and other places without a visa before that for 10 years. And it was discovered on one of John Ludwig's Facebook pages that he had worked for Disney. And on another one of his Facebook accounts, they found some photos posted in September of 2011. Some of these pictures are, just of the Disney Wonder, the boat, things like that. But there's one picture of a man who looks very much like John Ludwig wearing an Iron Man costume, but he's pulling the mask up so that you could see his face. Disney purchased Marvel in 2009, so it's not out of the ordinary that one of the characters walking around a Disney park or on a Disney ship might be Iron Man. Did John Ludwig work on the Disney Wonder? Was he there at the same time as Rebecca Coriam? If so, and we're aware that he has knowledge of how to travel between different countries without proper documentation. Being aware that he has a history of assaulting women before, and he has some boating skills, as well as an uncle who's a captain and owns a boat. It is an interesting theory that he may have been involved with getting Rebecca off the Wonder and to another location without too much trouble if he wanted to. Now, the next theory is that Rebecca took her own life, and this is the one being heavily pushed by her ex-girlfriend, Tracy Medley. Keep in mind that Tracy and Devin were the last people to talk to Rebecca before she vanished. And when Rebecca's last seen on CCTV, she's wearing Devin's clothes. Tracy actually said that after they'd had their little threesome thing and Rebecca got out of the shower, she wanted to go for a walk. She couldn't find her clothes, so Tracy told Devin to grab Rebecca some of his clothes, and that's what she was wearing. Now, Rebecca's family has always vehemently denied that their daughter would have done this. They said she was very happy and that she had been making plans for the future. She had just called her parents excitedly to tell them that she'd been given tickets to Disneyland in Paris and she wanted to bring them. Those tickets were found in her cabin, and there was also a note in her cabin. It appeared she had just written it and left it by her bed, and it read, "Call Mum." Now, Tracy Medley stayed silent about her relationship with Rebecca for over 6 years, but she finally spoke up because she felt that the events of that day weren't being properly and accurately depicted. And as a result, it seemed that she and Devin were getting accused of having something to do with what happened to Rebecca. Tracy says that Rebecca wasn't the happy girl her parents were claiming she was, stating, quote, "I've spent 6 years reading bullshit claims from Rebecca's family that she was a fun-loving, never sad athlete with no issues and a love for life," end quote. Tracy makes the claims that Rebecca was a completely different person than this, that she was struggling with emotional issues and drug abuse. She said Rebecca felt like a misfit and an outcast in her family who did not accept that she was a lesbian. At one point while they were together, Tracy was going through Rebecca's phone and found text messages where Rebecca was asking someone if they had more cocaine because she needed it. When Tracy confronted Rebecca about these texts, Rebecca got upset and accused Tracy of snooping through her phone, and then Rebecca claimed that she had used the drug in England, but she felt it had damaged her brain somehow, so she didn't use it as much now. Rebecca was fun and exciting and very passionate, but Tracy feels that she was in turmoil over the fact that Tracy was seeing other people, over the fact that Tracy had a boyfriend that had been in the picture far before Rebecca had come into Tracy's life. And Tracy wasn't looking for a committed relationship. She wasn't looking to settle down with any one person at that point. Now remember, Rebecca had left the ship for 2 weeks. She returned to the ship and found Tracy and Devin kind of, going at it again. And that first night that she got back and saw Tracy and Devin together, that's when she got very upset. And Tracy claims that Rebecca got so upset about her and Devin that she started screaming and banging her head on the metal walls of the ship. So the way it's explained is they're all at this party for the crew because they're gonna, take off from port the next day. They're all at this party for the crew and they're all drinking, obviously. Rebecca sees Tracy and Devin sneaking away. She gets upset, and as she's being walked back to her room, she starts screaming, hitting her head against the metal walls of the ship. She's slapping herself in the face. Remember, Tracy said it took 4 crew members to calm Rebecca down, but we haven't heard this story from any other crew member, only Tracy. And then this was the same night that Rebecca woke Tracy up and told her she felt like a failure because she wanted off the ship, but she was too afraid to jump. She felt that not being able to go through with it was a sign of how weak she actually was. So then the next night, the 3 of them had drinks together at the crew bar, and then they went back to Devin's cabin to mess around when Rebecca initiated the threesome. Tracy claims she felt hopeful and thought to herself, yes, there's my carefree girl. But then things went bad. Rebecca left upset and Tracy fell asleep, and claims that they didn't leave the cabin after that. So while John Ronson of The Guardian was on board the Wonder, he talked to people who had known Rebecca to kind of get an idea of what her fellow co-workers thought of her, and for the most part they said she was nice, friendly, low-key, a really happy girl who was a little bit of a prankster. Another crew member told John that Disney knew exactly what had happened with Rebecca. that they had a recording of the phone conversation Rebecca had had right before she disappeared. This crew member said, quote, "Everything here is taped. There's CCTV everywhere. Disney has the tape," end quote. John talked to another young man who had been a friend of Rebecca's and was also aware of the recording of the phone call. This friend said that he hadn't actually heard the tape, but he'd heard what was on it and that it was essentially just Rebecca complaining about a fight she'd had with her girlfriend. He then said, "There's no mystery. She was just a sweet girl with underlying sadness." So we have Tracy, who's saying that Rebecca was depressed, struggling with things, wasn't accepted by her family because of her sexuality. She claims Rebecca told her that her own sister was embarrassed of her and that she had gotten involved in some drugs. She also used the event of the night before, where Rebecca had gotten upset and was hitting her head on the walls and screaming and coming into Tracy's room and saying, "I wanted off the ship, but I didn't have the guts to do it." Tracy claims that this was a sign that Rebecca had previously attempted to take her own life. And Tracy believes that Rebecca was just so heartbroken and upset that she did try that night, and when she failed, she knew she was going to try again. But this time, she succeeded. Now, Rebecca's parents have always denied the possibility that their daughter could or would have done this. But as a parent, it's not unnatural that you might have a hard time accepting this about your child. Now, the theory of Mike and Ann Coriam is not that Rebecca accidentally or purposely went off the ship, but that she was attacked and thrown off the ship. Apparently, when Rebecca had gone home for her grandfather's funeral, she had confessed to some friends that she feared being sexually assaulted while aboard the Disney Wonder. And when her personal items were returned to her parents after her disappearance, they found her favorite pair of shorts, the shorts that she wore so much almost daily, and they were ripped. They were ripped right in the crotch area. So yes, Rebecca's parents did suspect that foul play happened. They suspected maybe even that Devin and Tracy had assaulted Rebecca against her will, which caused the ripped shorts, and then gotten rid of her afterwards. After getting no answers from Disney about an actual investigation, Mike and Ann went home to the UK and they got private investigators and politicians involved who all claimed to believe that Rebecca was killed on the ship. In the notes section from that one-day half-assed investigation that was done into Rebecca's disappearance, it states that both Devin and Tracy were interviewed after Rebecca went missing, and the notes claim that Devin had a very nonchalant attitude while being questioned. He was even laughing and joking, and the police had to give him a warning, like, "Settle down, young man, this is serious." Ann and Mike believe that the ripped shorts indicate that a struggle took place, and maybe it wasn't Rebecca who initiated the threesome, but Tracy and Devin, who were trying to pressure her into it. And when she said no, they forced her. Afterwards, she was upset since many of her friends believed that Rebecca had never had a relationship or any kind of sexual interaction with a man before, so Devin would have been her first. If she had gotten upset, if she'd started crying, if she threatened to report Tracy and Devin and then left, well, they might have panicked, and one or both of them might have followed her out. Now, when Rebecca was later seen on CCTV, she was wearing men's clothes, presumably Devin's, right? But where are the clothes that she wore into Devin's cabin? Are those the shorts that were later found ripped? And after she hung up the phone, she headed in the direction of the ship's health center. If she had just been assaulted, her going to the health center to get checked out and possibly report it would make a lot of sense. Because remember, she was not heading in the direction of the elevator or the stairs, which would have brought her up to the 5th floor pool deck. Did someone intercept her on the way to the health center, knock her out, and then push her overboard? And although Tracy did make a public statement eventually, 6 years later, no one's really ever talked to Devin. There's really nothing out there about him. I couldn't find really anything about this guy, and he's never really publicly come out and said anything, and he's never denied or refuted any statements being made about him suggesting he was a part of this. It's kind of like he's a mysterious sort of figure. Additionally, John Ronson of The Guardian also talked to some people aboard the Wonder who had some different opinions on what might have happened to Rebecca Coriam. One of these people was a waiter who told John that working on the Disney Wonder is all about the show. When in front of guests, you always have to be on and performing. When John asked about Rebecca, this waiter's eyes narrowed and he said, quote, "I don't know anything about it. It didn't happen. You know that's the answer I have to give." End quote. While John was on board, he examined every public area he could, but he was restricted from going to the staff pool at Deck 5 since this was off limits to guests. Knowing that Rebecca was an avid runner, John wondered if she had maybe taken a jog early that morning after getting off the phone to clear her head. In his article, John says, quote, "I've decided the only place Rebecca could have fallen from is the Deck 4 jogging track. The railings everywhere else are just too high. She was a keep fit fanatic. My theory is, after that 5:45 a.m. phone call, she went for a jog and slipped. So I'm surprised to spot 4 CCTV cameras on Deck 4, 2 on the port side, 2 on the starboard, evidently capturing every inch of deck." End quote. Now, as John was pondering all of this, he noticed an employee nearby who was, polishing a railing. John kind of sneaks up to this guy and he's like, "Hey, that girl who went missing back in March? She must have fallen from this deck." And the employee looked surprised and responded, "No, she went from Deck 5. When John told this employee that there was no outside space on Deck 5, the employee told him to go up to Deck 10, walk to the front of the ship, and look down, as that would give him a good vantage point of the crew pool. And then this employee said, "That's where she went from, the starboard side." Now, John asked this man, "How do you know this?" And the guy responded, "I was on the ship that day. Everybody knows. They found her slipper." So John did go up to Deck 10, and he looked down at the crew swimming pool, and he noticed that it was a very nice and large pool, but it didn't have a great view since the walls were so high you couldn't even see the ocean. He does not believe she could have possibly fallen off or gotten swept away by a rogue wave off that deck.
Now behind the glass you are protected from the wind. You can hardly feel it back here. On the other side of the glass, however, you might be able to hear it in the microphone, but the wind gets a lot more intense right over the bow. But these views, they just can't be beaten. Views like that just don't get old. Now take a look down there. You can see a pool, but that one is not for guests. That one is for crew and cast to use. So you'll see them using it sometimes, but very infrequently. But if you're on the Wonder, make your way up here. It's definitely worth it for these views.
So let's take each theory and analyze why and why not they are plausible. To start off with, I think the rogue wave theory is probably not very likely. The size and power of such a wave would have been substantial enough to alert at least one other person on board. Was she trafficked? It's always possible, especially in this kind of atmosphere, but in this specific case, I think it's highly unlikely. The only possible support for this would be her credit card being used and her Facebook password being changed after her disappearance. And I do believe that there's other explanations for this. The credit card company wouldn't release the information of what the charge was or where it happened to Rebecca's parents. So it could have been something as simple as a previous online purchase that had taken a while to clear and go through. That happens to me all the time. I'll buy something and then a week or two later, I'll finally see it reflect on my credit card or negated from my balance. She might have had some automated charges, monthly charges going through. And then once the credit card company found out that she was no longer alive, they may have closed the credit card, so those charges weren't going through any longer. As for her Facebook password, Facebook's such a weird kind of platform. It could have been anything, really. Her account might have been hacked. I'm always getting messages to my email somebody tried to log into your Facebook from this location at this time, verify it's you. Maybe somebody tried to hack her account and she got that email, but because she was missing, she wasn't able to verify that it was her, so maybe Facebook just locked the account. So when Rebecca's parents tried to sign in after this, it may have said incorrect password or your password's been changed. Rebecca could have had a friend who knew her password. Maybe this friend knew that Rebecca used Facebook as her main means of communication, and maybe Rebecca wouldn't have wanted her parents going through her personal messages, so she kind of went in to change it for her. And as far as the sighting of her in Italy, although I'm sure the woman thought it was Rebecca, I hate to think that this woman was just trying to, prank someone or throw false leads in. It most likely was not Rebecca. Maybe this woman had just seen a news report about Rebecca or read something about her that had her picture, and she was kind of primed to see this missing woman wherever she looked. And as far as John Ronson's theory about Rebecca jogging on the Deck 4 promenade to clear her head, of course that's possible. However, Rebecca wasn't really dressed for running. She was wearing Devon's clothes. And as far as we know, she didn't return to her cabin to change into workout clothes and sneakers. I don't really see her going out for a run wearing men's clothes that were several sizes too big for her. That would be dangerous. And with her cabin just a short distance away, if she really wanted to go for a run, I think she would have changed into the appropriate clothing. Now, did she take her own life? It's hard to say for sure since I didn't know Rebecca personally. However, it does seem odd that only one person has come forward claiming that Rebecca was struggling with these deep, dark thoughts. No one else has ever said that there was any issues inside the family or that Rebecca's parents were angry with her for being a lesbian. They certainly have denied that this is the case, and none of her friends from home have ever given any indication that Rebecca felt cast aside by her family because of who she was, but her friends from home did say that Rebecca was afraid of being assaulted on the ship. And she was making plans for the future. She was planning on going with her parents to Disneyland Paris. She was writing notes to herself to remind her to call her mother. It's a little hard to swallow that Rebecca would have gotten herself so twisted up over one girl who she'd only known a few months, and she'd feel so brokenhearted at having to share Tracy with somebody else. She would have felt there was nothing else for her to do but throw herself off a cruise ship, which honestly is one of the worst ways to go. If the impact of the water doesn't get you, you're going to drown. And if you really no longer want to live, there's much easier and less painful ways to go about it. Was she killed to cover up an assault? Once again, highly unlikely. I have no doubt that Rebecca wasn't crazy about getting wrapped up into a love triangle. And if she did initiate it or go along with it, she mostly did it in order to appease Tracy or to try and find a way to make it work, only to discover that that whole thing wasn't for her, and she'd never really be happy with that arrangement. We know that she talked to a friend on the phone afterwards who knew both Rebecca and Tracy, and even though that call hasn't been released, and even though nobody's really heard the call, talk goes around, gossip goes around the ship, and I'm sure the girl who Rebecca was on the phone with may have told a couple of people what Rebecca said on the phone, and then it got around, which is how, people know the gist of what happened. But if she'd been assaulted, I have to believe that Rebecca would have told this girl on the phone that she'd just been sexually assaulted and she didn't know what to do, and that's what she was upset about. But maybe not, I don't know. And if she did tell this girl that she was on the phone with that she was assaulted, this girl certainly never told anybody else that, not the investigator, not Rebecca's parents, not anybody else on the ship. However, the fact that Disney most likely does have a copy of this phone call and they haven't shared it seems a little shady. I honestly, in my opinion, I think it was an accident, a sad, tragic accident. John Ronson said in his article that he didn't think alcohol played a huge part in what happened to her because he'd tried the drinks on the ship and he said that they were very, very weak. However, we have to remember that the crew had their own bar and it's just for the crew, and normally the person behind the bar is probably going to be, a coworker, a friend, a fellow crew member. So the drinks at this bar were probably getting poured much stronger than the drinks at the regular bars that the customers and the guests would drink. They were all in solidarity together, the crew. They knew how hard it was to be out to sea for months at a time, and maybe they felt that a little extra alcohol would help make it a little bit easier. Now, she was not drunk at 11 p.m. when she met with her friend Melissa in the secret corridor, but she did say she was going to the bar, and she had some drinks at the bar that night, maybe more than she would normally drink because she was steeling herself for what was about to happen in Devon's cabin that night. After she left the cabin upset and brokenhearted, she made the phone call, and her friend told her to get some rest, and they would figure it all out the next day. Maybe Rebecca was feeling a bit reckless. Maybe she just felt like doing something that would make her feel alive. Being the daredevil she was, maybe she did go to the crew pool and climb to the top of the 6-foot wall so she could look out and be alone to think with the wide open ocean in front of her. If the ship hit some rough waters, she could have been knocked off. Her parents reported that they don't believe the rogue wave theory because the sea was calm that night. Well, when you're out in the middle of the ocean, the weather and the water conditions can change anytime, and they can change back just as quickly. And there are also reports from other people that were actually on the ship that night, which Rebecca's parents weren't, and they said that the water was a little choppy and that it was kind of getting windy and the weather was kind of changing for the worse. So that brings us back to the question, is Disney covering this up in any way? I think we can all agree that the rogue wave idea is just not the best, But why would they feel the need to hide it if she'd just jumped off the ship herself, or if she'd accidentally fallen? The answer, in my opinion, my humble opinion, don't come for me, is the Disney experience. The happiest place in the world where everyone's smiling and cartoon characters are walking around and there's no talk about sadness or death. The Disney experience. It's the name of their app, which excited families around the world use every single day to plan their dream Disney vacation. It's the foundation upon which the entire Disney empire is built. And it's put in place as much for the parents whose childhoods revolved around Mickey Mouse and Ariel and Tinkerbell as it is for the children. Let's go back to Rebecca's friend, Melissa, who was interviewed by the Guardian reporter. Remember what she said. He asked her why Disney would suppress Rebecca's death if they didn't have a hand in it, and Melissa responded, to protect the brand. Even if there was no foul play and Rebecca simply slipped into the ocean, even if she made the decision to take her own life that day, due to the extensive CCTV footage, it's very likely that Disney knows a lot more about the circumstances. But a young girl falling to her death off a cruise ship doesn't really scream the Disney experience. Better to blame it on a rogue wave, an act of God. No one could have planned for that. No one could have prepared for that, not even Mickey Mouse. No amount of security or precautionary measures can stack up against a 100-foot wave emerging from the sea and disappearing as quickly as it had popped up with Rebecca Coriam as its captive. The rogue wave theory is the one that puts Disney at the furthest arm's length from that tragedy. If she took her own life, there might be questions about the long hours that employees spend working on the ship each day. There might be queries on the mental health of the crew and maybe suggestions that they should get longer breaks or more frequent shore leaves, all of which would affect Disney's bottom dollar. If she accidentally fell off, this might raise questions about how safe going on a Disney cruise ship, or any cruise ship, actually is. Those left on board would certainly not enjoy the rest of their floating vacation knowing that a girl who had spent much more time on the Disney Wonder than they had, who probably knew the terrain very, very well, still wasn't safe from falling to her death from its deck.
They told us over the loudspeakers several times that they were looking for her.
Okay.
And then all of a sudden they said they still hadn't found her.
We didn't notice anybody panicking or, frantically going in and out of rooms or...
I actually didn't even notice. I didn't even notice the search. I mean, it was... They said that they were searching, but it was nothing obvious.
I talked to one of the people that pick up. They said that they found her shoes and her belongings. And
So that's my theory. Personally, it's my belief. It's two-pronged. I do think it was an accident. I think she may have been under the influence of some alcohol, which probably affected her reaction time. I think the alcohol also maybe allowed her to think it was a good idea to crawl up on those 6-foot-high safety walls and sit or even stand there. We've all seen Titanic, right? Who doesn't want to be Jack just on the bow of the ship screaming, "I'm the king of the world"? She needed a win. She needed to feel good about herself and about life and hopeful. And I think that's what she went up there to get. She went up there to get some perspective. She went up there to kind of be alone and reconnect with her old self, remember who she was. I don't think that she would have taken her own life, but I do think that Disney knows a lot more than they're telling us. And I do think, allegedly, that they may be covering up what really happened to her. And I feel that way because of some of the evidence that we've talked about today, but I also feel that way because of what happened after Rebecca's parents continued to make a fuss and shout out that their daughter wasn't getting the investigation and the justice that she deserved. In 2014, Rebecca's parents, Mike and Anne, filed papers against Disney claiming the entertainment giant failed in its duty of care. In these papers, they claimed that Disney gave false and misleading information about the ship's position when it alerted the Coast Guard. They also alleged that Disney's security to monitor crew members and passengers was inadequate, as was its surveillance for a person falling overboard. A spokeswoman for Disney Cruise Lines responded and said, "This incident has been investigated by the authorities. The claims are without merit, as we will demonstrate in court." And Rebecca's parents were suing Disney for $75,000. But then Disney settled. I figured this out after I contacted the Coriam family to try to get more information and clear up some inconsistencies that I found when I was researching the case. I just wanted to pretty much run by the things that I was fuzzy on and have them, sharpen it up for me, but they didn't respond. And then they didn't respond, and then they didn't respond. And after a week had passed, I thought, well, what's going on here? They say they want help, and they say they want help, figuring out what happened to their daughter, and they want exposure for her case. I hope they're getting these messages. And then I did some, further digging, and I found out that they settled with Disney for an undisclosed amount. They settled out of court for an undisclosed amount sometime in 2015, so it's really hush-hush, it's really kind of secret. But it appears that part of this settlement agreement was that Rebecca's family would stop speaking publicly about the case and stop, trying to suggest that something happened. And there was a website for Rebecca Coriam. I will put the link in the description box, but there's a video on there, and it says for Rebecca, and it looks like it's from her parents and her siblings. But that video is no longer there. So it seems like there's a lot that kind of was taken away from the website, maybe from the internet altogether after this settlement, but that's just my opinion. That's what it seems like. So that's pretty much, I think, why it's really died down and nobody's been talking about it anymore, because they technically and legally can't. But as always, I would love to know what your opinions are on this case, what you think about it. It is a mystery. It's a mystery that bothers me, just like Amy Lynn Bradley has bothered me, because there is something about the open sea that's incredibly terrifying to me. And for me, there would be no worse fate than falling into this ginormous body of water and not being able to get help. Make sure you like the video if you liked it. Make sure you share this video if you think it's worth sharing. Make sure you subscribe if you haven't already. And always make sure to put plenty of comments down below so we can have a discussion. I want to know what you guys think. Which theory do you think is the most plausible? Do you think that Tracy and Devin had anything to do with this? Do you think that Tracy's claims about Rebecca being depressed and having a drug problem and maybe not having the best relationship with her parents is true? Do you think that Disney kind of brushed a lot of this under the rug and hid some things? Let me know if you've ever been on a Disney cruise. What was your experience? Let me know if you've ever been on any cruise. What was your experience? It's not going to convince me to go on a cruise, but it's still a fun thing to talk about. As always, thank you so much for being here with me. I really appreciate every single one of you that comes back time after time for every one of these videos. You have my entire heart. Well, the part that my husband and my kids don't have, but I really, really, really appreciate you. I appreciate all my sponsors, my Patreons, and every single one of you guys out there who subscribe and watch. Like, it means the absolute world to me. Remember to stay kind, stay beautiful, stay safe, and I will see you very, very soon.
Straight down, and that river runs deep, the mountains get steep, and the voices getting too loud. All these feelings I've buried, it's looking like a cemetery. They're going back from the grave, calling out my name, better say a Hail Mary. Well, you don't know how deep it goes until it's getting you slowly, and so you got to let it go.